Welcome back to our after lunchtime series on our OHDSI Open Source Developers Conference. This afternoon, we're going to have a conversation around how do we build sustainable business models for our OHDSI community. So before I do, I want to first talk about, a lot of the reasons, a lot of people who develop for OHDSI are volunteers. And that's actually a really important part of our community. And one question is why do volunteers donate their time to be part of the OHDSI community and do software development? And I think it's really important to know that software developers, certainly like all of us, like to be part of a higher purpose and see the value of observational research and this time for spreading evidence. And so it is a great feeling to be part of a large community and to be part of a movement, an initiative that's really driving better healthcare outcomes for everyone. But also, there are also some intrinsic reasons, motivations as well. We mentioned them earlier today that software developers are going to be, this is a great way for them to learn, to have freedom, to try out new tools, to actually get some mentoring from other software developers. This also is an important part of their career development. They could be adding these, their GitHub profile is often their CV. For recruiters. And so being part of important projects that are making a difference is actually a great way for them to do career development and promotion. And so, and I think it also, lastly, it is great to be part of a community and to be interacting with your peers and getting that type of peer feedback to be part of that process. So there are really good intrinsic motivations for volunteers to be part of OHDSI. But in the real world that I live in, there's only so much volunteers can donate as a function of their time. At some point, they have to pay the bills as just like everybody else, and so there's often a limit to what percentage of their time they can be part of open source activities. And so this is where software developers like to find positions where they actually get paid to do open source development within the OHDSI community. And so certainly we see there's several companies and in industry that are aligned with open source that benefit from the OHDSI ecosystem for creating real world evidence, for developing the tools, and for being able to answer evidence-based questions. And so we certainly see that there's a good business model for corporate sponsorships to be aligned with OHDSI. It's a way of these companies having a lower cost of ownership instead of having to own all this technology themselves, and also be part of this community. As you've also seen, we also have seen funding from several academic sites. So this is often tied through grants. Grants can often have stipulations in them that says that the software needs to be for the benefit of the community and has to be open sourced. And often the grants are just collaborative in nature, where it's just better aligned with an open source mentality because it's better fit for research purposes. And so we certainly see grants and corporate sponsorships as great drivers for our OHDSI community in addition to volunteerism. But today we also want to talk about some other potentially newer models that we can be looking at for helping our great software developers fund their time to be involved in OHDSI. One thing we haven't seen yet, there's certainly a lot of developers who get paid through donations and through Patreon pages. So we haven't seen that yet within the OHDSI community of taking advantage of crowdfunding campaigns and activities, but that would be certainly innovative. A couple of things we're going to be talking about today is dual licensing, like what we call open core. And so I'm going to start off the conversation. We're going to have 3 different presenters talk about their models and how they're trying to fund open source engineering development through business models. And then we're going to have a conversation. So with that, I'd like to start with James Green and Cognome to help explain to us what Cognome is doing, and also help us explain how open core can be a business model that can both support industry development as well as the OHDSI software development ecosystem. James?
Hi, thanks, Paul. Good to see you. Um, so I'm going to assume that most of you don't know who Cognome are. We But perhaps some of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Parsa Miharji at the Montefiore Health System, as he's been a contributor to the Odyssey community. We licensed all of the work that he built there and at University of Texas before that, and are making that available. We're a mission-driven organization where our mission is to help create learning health systems using the Odyssey stack and related open source tools. The uh, so that's who we are. Our product set is, I would say, adjacent or maybe the flip side of the coin to Odyssey. We support every single thing that Odyssey creates, and we hope over time to contribute to it. We're young, by the way. We only spun out of the health system on June 1st of last year. So we're young. We haven't had time to make many meaningful contributions to you guys yet, but we will. But our focus is on the provider side, doing the things that you need to do to get an OMOP CDM in place. So we've extended or created new tools from scratch to do that. So for example, in Atlas, which our version we call Search, has the ability to upload and download cohorts within it, which means that you probably have identifiable information in it, which means we have integrated with institutions IRBs so that you can get an IRB and then have the right to see identified or de-identified information, which by extension then means you need to be able to do de-identification on the fly, which we support. So you can see how then you could have one data set, which is how our systems work, with both identified information in it. But if your IRB says you can only see aggregated information or only see de-identified information, then that's all that you will be able to see. We support things like private workspaces and enclaves and things like that. We've added some NLP, a big NLP proportion to it, and then we maintain everything in a way that a CIO would like it. So our stack supports, because it's real time as well, so our stack is either HL7 or incremental daily updates. We support the building of models that can then be used in operations. So for example, our sepsis model was built on the OMOP stack because we have the real-time updates, but it's used in clinical operations. And then we have some tools that sit on top of that that monitor that model and all models for bias, drift, and other operational things, including governance. So that's what we do. As I said, we are a mission-driven organization, and I'm sort of going to digress for just a second to talk about open source in general. All open source is paid for by someone. My favorite example is the most famous one, which is Linux. It's estimated that well north of 90%, I've seen the numbers as high as 99% of all code is now paid for by people, and it's paid for by the people that benefit from it. So Red Hat is obvious, but IBM, Google, Dell, Amazon, all of these people benefit from having Linux, the Linux kernel, and of course they then pay people directly and through other contributions pay to make sure that it's supported. So we have a similar model. And I think this, as Paul said, is why we're here. We have a membership model where when people join us, they can then see the source code and extend it internally. But we charge for that because we need to be able to maintain that source code. So over time, we expect to release more of it to what you would recognize as open source, meaning that anybody can contribute to it. But until we're a little more stable, we are requiring that people pay explicitly to support our efforts, and then in exchange they get to see the source. They can do all the things with it that the Odyssey license enables them to do. They can extend it, they can branch it. Importantly, they can contribute it back. And one of the sort of big issues that we're helping health systems solve, and we're in or around about a dozen US-based health systems at this point, is conversations with the CIO. So open source, whether you like it or not, or whether it's right or not, I'm not debating. But open source is not favored by most CIOs, rightly or wrongly. Again, I'm not debating that. It's just that most of them would prefer to have someone's neck on the line for the software that's running. And so we support that. So we have cybersecurity insurance, we support SOC 2, we do all of the things that a CIO would expect from a proprietary provider, and yet we still allow people to see the source code, extend it, do innovation on top of it, contribute back to it, and then we will support that code base.
Yeah, so James, the way I would say that, so I've been around for 30 years. So I remember when CIOs were really allergic to open source code. I would say they're not allergic at all to open source code now. As a matter of fact, they like it, but they have to have a support mechanism. They understand the total cost of ownership of having to hire someone who knows that code to be able to implement it and then turn it in. So they understand the services that need to go with it. So open source is a great way of protecting them from being end of life, which happens so much in healthcare. It's actually a great tool. However, there needs to be a company that can provide services, so when something happens, they can make sure that they can retain it. So I think it's gotten a little bit better over the past 30 years, but I find that that conversation has become more nuanced.
I completely concur. And also there's people on the spectrum, right? So there are CEOs who warmly embrace it and others who are further away. But I agree that the thing that they're all looking for are who's going to support it when there's additions made. How am I going to make sure that I have a software bill of materials? How am I going to make sure that I have assurance behind it when something goes wrong? Who do I call when I need an update? All of that is what they're really, really concerned about.
The way I would say it is the risk tolerance in healthcare is very low. And you're right, they need to make sure that there's going to be indemnification. So security scanning is actually a big deal. So especially with open source software, making sure that's not going to introduce vulnerabilities within their secure environments.
Yeah. And so we do all of that. I think that's a good enough start to the intro.
Do you have any? So what I've seen service models in OHDSI, like Odysseus and IQVIA, helping the hundreds of sites take their EHR data and convert it into OMA. I was really excited last year. We saw a new company that was doing an evidence-based model, helping sites lead and helping industry do network studies. And that was their model. And so they would get services for helping do network studies. And so it seems to me that what you're doing is helping learning health systems get more internal value out of OHDSI and trying to find ways that they can accelerate internal research.
Correct. And we're trying to combine these two groups inside a hospital system, the operational, the CIOs, that group with the research group, so that when you build a model, it's not just for research. And when you build it using data that is for research, you can then use that same data, because it is the same data, over in the operational side. So all of the above. And we are less of a services company. We will still provide services for people willingly. We'd love to, but we're trying to provide a stack that people can stand behind, and so keep that up to date.
That's what I'm hoping you can explain. Do you have any examples to help us better understand what open core might mean?
Yeah, so open core can mean many things to many different people. So, the easiest way to understand it is that it's an open source product that has some restrictions around it. So if you want to, and this isn't how we work, but it's a good example of it's the easiest way to understand it. So you can use it, you can download it. Let's say it's an open source graph database. We use one. You can download it, you can run it locally. But if you want to run it in the cloud, then you have to buy the proprietary license. So that there's some seriously useful things you can do. But then if you want to run it in a particular way, then you need to provide get the proprietary license. And so in our case, if you want to have us stand behind the code. If you want us to have that cybersecurity insurance, have that SOC 2 compliance, high trust compliance, give you the software bill of materials, make sure that all of the component parts that make up that stack are completely up to date, give you that full software bill of materials and all the security scanning, then we ask you to join a collaborative, and then we will stand behind all of it. Otherwise, you can extend it and do what you want. So that's the idea of open core, which is you have these two different component parts, one which is useful without, and then one which is more useful, hopefully, with. And we hope to be able to, because again, we're mission driven, we hope to be able to give more away over time, but we're still little. So someone has to pay for me to eat and our developers to eat. And so we are still more on the fee side of life than we are on the giving it away side of life at the moment, though the code will always be available for extension to anyone who's using it.
And so would you say, so when you say open core, at the heart of it is the open source data model and the vocabulary and the OHDSI technology, because that is research and you're trying to help accelerate that. And some companies, so one is, sometimes you have some functionality that you may not open source for a period of time. So there's like a period of time that you might wait until that you can justify the investment to release it. And sometimes there's advanced enterprise features, like lots of enterprise integration with like an IRB approval system, perhaps, or some other things that we need to have lots of glueware within our complex environments that might make more sense. That's really going to be so enterprise integration is often another area where. So do you think would Red Cap be the best example of a company that's really founded this on this model?
I don't certainly Red Cap. Do you mean Red Hat or Red Cap?
I'm sorry, Red Hat. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I've got Red Cap on the brain. Yes, I totally meant Red Hat.
So Red Hat is a super interesting example. So again, just to recap, Red Hat supports the Linux software operating environment. They have a proprietary one that's more secure, quote unquote, that they will stand behind. It's been a very, very difficult journey for Red Hat. They even had some developers leave at one time, and they had to go buy that company back to sort of keep some control of it, because in the end, they don't have control over the stack. And their model really is services-based model. And so I do think Red Hat is a good example, but better examples of open core are sort of more modern versions, like I used a graph database, or there's SQL databases, or there's a whole bunch of other technology products that are open core, meaning that you can use them, but if you use them in a different environment, if you cross some line, then you have to buy the proprietary version. Whereas Red Hat Linux, that's not true. There is no line.
Red Hat was doing this in the 90s, where a lot of it was they had to educate the entire industry as they were doing.
Correct. That, let's remember, it was the 90s. It's 30 years ago.
I was there. I was excited. Amazing. I had my little CDs of my distros, and Anyway, I would like to also bring in Jan Blom and Wouter Franke from the Hyve, if you guys wouldn't mind doing a quick introduction to add to our conversation about some of the ways that you've been able to build a business model around supporting the OHDSI ecosystem.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. My name is Wouter Franke from the Hyve. We've been around for 12 years now, based in the Netherlands, and basically we work around services and open source. And I think in terms of a business model, you mentioned already quite a bit around the service model. But where we help develop open source software, either within the OHDSI community or outside of the OHDSI community, we quite often start with these kind of things within the grant. Might be able to build specific features for specific users, and I think James mentioned it as well. So people actually willing to pay for a specific functionality within a tool. And we are actually able to help build that. But I think the greatest problem always with open source software is the maintenance at some point. Building a feature, it's always nice. Everyone likes to build a feature, even if you're going to spend some time in your free time as a volunteer. You would love to add a new feature. But if it's about maintenance, if it's about scanning for security vulnerabilities, fixing them, there is quite often where open source can sometimes struggle. And what we try to do is really provide people with support. So yearly support where we say, hey, we can help you actually run these kind of security scans, make sure you've got the updates. And that addresses a little bit of that CIO problem as well, where they at some point might, and I agree with you what you said, Paul, they've got a more nuanced view of I'm looking at open source, but still it's a very important component of it needs to be supported. It needs to be sure that it adheres to any security requirements that we've got. And sometimes even as easy saying, hey, it's open source, or it's not open source, but it has a support contract, it still has an open source license, but we support it. It's sometimes already enough to say, hey, now I'm happy to actually adopt it. For example, what we do around OHDSI, we help support quite a bit within the White Rabbit tools. That's mainly based on, well, us as users ourselves, or the fact that we have been able to support it from some of the grant projects. But we also run projects where we help different hospitals in a data collaboration actually to say, hey, we all want to go towards OMOP, we all want to implement OMOP as a basis for our collaborative research. And then we can actually come in and start the work, but then also support that also for the open source tooling, saying, hey, we're going to support that for the next 3 to 5 years. So you can actually enjoy the benefits without worrying too much about maintenance, about affecting, hey, do we still have enough knowledge to support it in these kind of issues that open source sometimes brings?
Yeah, I think there's actually 2 major challenges, although I don't know if it's open source or I think it's almost any software. It's always, even if, any software is always fun to work on new features. It's always hard to work on some of the infrastructure components around it. And I think the 2 things, one that you mentioned was certainly maintenance, and that's going to be something that's always hard to justify from an engineering perspective. And hopefully, I think one of the things that we do well in open source is we use open standards in a way where we make bugs shallow. We can have other people can often who use the software can submit some patches along with it for their bespoke database that they use to support the OHDSI community, which we might not have available for testing. But I think the other challenge that I'd love to get your thoughts on is refactoring. At what point do we think about how do we start thinking about refactoring as well as just maintenance?
That's a very true question, because a normal, it doesn't matter if it's open source or not, but every software has its life cycle. And there are moments in time where you really need to do that refactoring, really say, hey, we need to change it. Otherwise, at some point, this product will die, will stop functioning properly. That's a very hard to actually justify also in terms of costs, because it benefits everyone. But try to find one organization willing to pay for it. And there is where a community can really help. But then the community needs to have its proper institutions, proper governance there as well, because you might need someone to either say, hey, now we've got this big chunk of work ahead of us. How do we distribute the costs? Who's going to fund it? How are we going to actually manage that work? And what we see in some other communities is that a leading role from an academic institution can really help or benefit a community in these kind of really large refactoring projects.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that hopefully some agency or some thought leader can help rally the community to get over a investment hurdle to be able to look for a new refactoring effort. James, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in and say I don't think this is an open source issue. Every single software has it. and I sort of I have two experiences with it. One is with Amazon, where their goal is to touch every line of code within 3 years. So, so that nothing stays out of date. And one is with Google, whom I sold a company to, and I saw what happened, and they just immediately rewrote everything, and they do sort of do that as a matter of course. And so the healthiest organizations, and I'm not trying to promote them as the best, but I think we all recognize that they are good at keeping their code base up to date in those two examples. The healthiest code base has financing in place in order to be overstaffed, so that you're not just building for this and then you put it into maintenance mode, but you have an evergreen effort to keep these things up to date, and you have some timeline in your mind. Amazon's is 3 years, it could be 5 years, but it can't be 10. That, whatever you've written is got to be rewritten if it's going to be relevant. And so again, it comes back to money and about staffing.
And I think it comes down to the cost of not refactoring. In terms of one of the advantages of open source software is it's fairly adaptable. So groups can add on pieces to it, and it's relatively flexible because you can get into the code of it, you can see the architecture of it. It's often designed off of data standards that have a longer shelf life than proprietary standards. But yes, I do feel like at some point there does need to be an opportunity where now we want to do this so that we can be more extensible and more pluggable within an environment. We see that with a lot of different products. And that's where everyone's moving to like APIs. I like the Amazon principle of every service group is an API that needs to talk to each other through APIs.
Me too.
Maybe to add on that one, James, because I do agree with you that with every software project you need to overstaff it or ensure you've got enough financing to keep working on all existing code base. Sometimes the tricky part with open source is that over-financing in a way, because when you will look at, okay, what is someone willing to finance? It's a specific new feature. And saying, hey, but we need to add another 20%, which basically supports that overstaffing, over-financing. It can be quite a hard discussion because for that one particular organization, but we only really need that one feature. So adding that 20% is just an additional cost for them in a way, or they perceive it as an additional cost. And I think that's where the difference is between the Google, the Amazons, or any proprietary software where you sell a license, where you can take into account that overstaffing, that overfinancing, versus open source, where even within grants, it's quite often really focused on specific features that are added and not necessarily on the maintenance.
Yeah. And I think part of it, and I am a consumer, is the part of the problem is a lot of it is a consumers, is actually the clinical research community is not very mature in IT services generally. We are not funded around maintenance. We often aren't able to add those things to our grants. And often we don't run our systems with 5 nines like we do in our clinical production systems. And so we haven't learned some of the costs of not having thought through some of those architectural decisions in our software architecture for how the systems integrate with each other. So I do feel it's still really a very immature industry, even compared to the clinical IT EHR side, where it's still that is still in its first generation of technology. So I don't know, we're still in the baby stage of the clinical research community's informatics maturity model. I don't know.
It's a bit focused on the next research. So if your research outlook is a year or 2 year, that's normally your outlook for any software then as well. And I think that's part of the problem, that the thinking cycle and the investment cycle is relatively short in these kind of projects.
It is, and we often don't think of our data as we've just begun to think of our data as a valuable resource that needs to have data stewardship and data cataloging and understanding provenance around our data so that we can use it for research purposes. So I work with a lot of health organizations on how do we build organizational capacity to build this. So I do kind of have a question for both of you in that, how much of your role is helping those sites that are trying to do the research build that organizational capacity and maturity to be able to be a good partner with you?
Yeah, I mean, I have one thing to add to the end, which I think this also what you said is one of the reasons for historically poor user interfaces, which is that you have a, if you think of in our communities, we're just trying to build something for an expert, whereas a proprietary software is trying to build something for the lowest possible common denominator. And so, if the user interface is kind of sucks, then I can still use it. I'm good. But if it was a paid for product, you would have a much, much higher level of user interface. One of the things that we are, and I think this has been hard. I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do, and not saying that we're achieving it yet. Some success is that everyone in the community has some way of taking information from the EHR biorepository or everywhere else, genetic database, wherever you're getting your data from, notes, etc., into an OMOP format. And mostly that's a cottage industry of bespoke solutions. What we're trying to say is, hey, listen, why don't you become part of our community, and we'll support all of that so that you can then go and do cutting edge research, because it isn't any longer cutting edge research to go and connect those data sources. So one of our arguments is that you can redeploy your assets elsewhere. We can be much cheaper than people, and you can rely on our infrastructure. Now, I'm going to admit one of the things that's incredibly hard is people who have built their own systems don't love to switch out systems for things they didn't build. So it's not. I cannot say that we've won that argument everywhere we've gone, but it's an argument that we deploy.
I would say that in most projects we do quite a lot in capacity building at our customers, because we believe it's one thing to deploy the tools. It's to build a pipeline, to work with to do a study within the OHDSI toolkit. But I think it really at most organizations, they want to build the capabilities themselves as well. They do want to be able to support it. So I would reckon half of our services don't necessarily go into really the OHDSI toolkit, but around their knowledge sharing, their workshops. They are thinking about data quality, so writing about data quality for them. How do you actually then apply the OHDSI toolkit? So but also take them into your process. So what is your feedback loop for any data quality issues? So yeah, like I said, half of our time actually we spend more on educating and helping people to be able to support it in the long term, with sometimes more and sometimes limited success. I mean, obviously it's needs to be an intrinsic value for the company as well. They need to want it, but it's a very big part of what we actually do.
Excellent. I really enjoyed Patrick's question from the last session. So I'd love to reframe his question and get your thoughts from some business leaders. What do you think OHDSI can be doing to help support or help try to encourage more professional software development funding within the OHDSI community? What sort of things do you think we could help organize that might help us be able to get more developers working within our ecosystem?
Yeah, it feels to me that the value of OMOP is undervalued in provider institutions. Most grants and requests for data these days are in OMOP, and yet I think there's a very poor understanding of the connection between that value at an institution and what they're paying for it, which isn't much. And I'd love to see some concentrated campaign to help institutions tie directly the value they're getting out of OMOP and how it relates to grants and any operational improvements and publish. I just don't see it.
Yeah. And we haven't done a great job talking about it, but actually the biggest value to health systems for OMOP is because most health systems are really struggling to have analysts and talented analysts help them understand their data. So what's nice about OMOP is that they have to support data. They have to support they have clinical registries. They've got national repositories. So there's lots of there's quality measures that we report to So we have actually so many data analytics needs within a health system that productivity is critical. And so actually OMOP actually solves two key problems for health systems in that it improves the productivity of their data analysts and also gives them some synergy so they're not doing 15 different data models for every different registry that they're working with. And so it actually has been a great, one of the things we've seen in several institutions is that whenever we work with a new registry, we say, okay, if it's not OMOP, we probably can't afford it. It's going to take too much clinician time to do chart abstraction. It's going to take too much new data modeling around it. And so there's only if some registry came to us today with a brand new data model, we're like, why? Why would you do that? What is the extra value that this new data model is providing? And so I do think that, if you're thinking in the mind of the CIO, they are having a real hard time. They need to make a lot of changes to the business. Making changes to an organization requires data and analysts to help them interpret those things. And the data analyst resource is very, very challenged in healthcare because we don't pay them as much as they deserve as they can get in other industries. And often, they have to do, they're overtaxed with all these different projects. And then they might need to get really deep into the weeds into a clinical EHR system that can often take years to be really fully certified in those really very commercial proprietary data models. And so the second problem that OMOP solves for them is a big one, is how do you hire qualified people? How do you know someone's comfortable working with the EHR data? And so finding OMOP people, since it's open source and it's been so prevalent, it's actually reasonable to find people that can work with the OMOP data model. We have so much online training. And so I feel like it solves a critical shortage right now in healthcare around the analyst space. But you just triggered that. I'm sorry for that one soapbox because you...
No, I completely agree. But I think if you went to a CIO and said, what's the value of me having an OMOP instance, your answers would be, they may not know, or they may give you a value that's much lower. And so communicating that, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's also part of the recognition of the data provider and the effort they put in terms of providing that data. And that recognition can be part financial, but that can also just be part in terms of the scientific recognition, saying, hey, to be able to have this data in a common data model, which we can then utilize within different research collaborations, that recognition. And with that, potentially then also, in my mind, would come at some point maybe some additional funding or the recognition saying, hey, this is really valuable work. And maybe with that, again, even a higher pay or whatever. But it's not only financial, but that recognition for the effort a data provider puts into making sure data is high quality, it's in a common data model, so it's usable, that can definitely be increased. And
so I got the request from James that he wants me to raise awareness with health systems around the data model and the value you can provide within an organization. Do you have a recommendation that you would love to see in OHDSI to help bring more, professional development into our field? Because I'm definitely working on James's issue. That's a great one.
I'm here to help you, Paul.
I'm gonna need it.
Wouter?
Yeah, it's I reckon partly it's a bit of time because you see more and a broader recognition of everything that's happening within OMOP. So it's you see more hospitals, more healthcare providers actually thinking about OMOP, starting to work with OMOP, and that bigger range gets into more to an environment where it's less academic and more into healthcare professionals. And I think with that broader outlook, you automatically get a more a different audience sometimes. So, and with a different audience, I think also come more professional software developers. So I believe it's. I wouldn't be surprised that if, for example, by next year or 2 years from now, that we would see an increase in terms of professional development around the OHDSI tools, based on just the fact that it's being more accepted. More and more hospitals actually working around it, so it gets more and more outside of that academic sphere.
I think that's a great point too. Certainly in the U.S., where only about 10% of care is delivered in academic medical centers. We have gotten great penetration of the OMOP data model in the academic medical centers, but community health centers have far less analytic resources, and we would need to then, they also aren't as driven by a research model as part of their clinical care model. So we would really need to be able to show operational value for, say, reporting of quality metrics or benchmarking of operational data, which can be done with OMOP. But we have not really fully demonstrated that as a community. So I think that would also be, that could also open up another large community of potential users of the data model.
Yeah, we are, to say we're doing this an exaggeration, we're doing it on a small scale. Because we support a real-time OMOP CDM, we have these models on it for smaller health systems. We just signed a partnership with NJII, and we're signing a couple of others. We're providing our models to these smaller health systems. What they don't know is that when we provide the model, underneath it, we build an OMOP CDM. And so we're building several OMOP CDMs in community health systems under the radar. You know, they're looking for the operational thing. They're looking for, you know, a chart abstraction, a sepsis, or whatever the model it does. But we bring in the OMOP CDM underneath it, and then and which we then enable it to be used for other purposes. So we also see the value of switching to the operational side and providing value there, and not only being on the clinical side.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of you know, at some point, right? It becomes the value is in the evidence we generate. The value is in the reporting that we do, and that's all they really know about. And OMOP helps them know that they retain flexibility and are not going to be, you know, end of life, or they're not locked in. It gives them that. It just gives them a flexibility in being able to work across different potential vendors. So I certainly could see that as a good use as we start getting more and more adoption. I mean, the good news is we're certainly seeing a lot more data being generated at health systems, and we're certainly seeing, you know, this is going to be an evolving area. And so I'm really excited that you guys are charting out new courses to find models that can help us fund the community and get value out of our data model for different consumers. We do have one more person I wanted to bring into this conversation, Peter Hoffmann and his group Data for Life. Unfortunately, Peter currently resides in a time zone that's inhospitable for this one, and so we had to record his talk ahead of time. And so they've done D2E, which was a repo created this year that they've done a lot of development around. And he's been doing this work as part of a foundation. And I think we'll try to keep this down to about 10 minutes so that we can do a little bit of wrap up. But while he's doing that, I really want to encourage everyone in our community to put some questions in, and we'll try to hit a couple more questions right after Peter's video is over. Alrighty, Sean, you want to play Peter's video?
Let me share it right now.
And we'll try to figure out how to cut it off. Because I talked to him for over an hour, and I can talk for a long time. So we're going to have to cut off the video at some point.
Yeah. Can everybody see this?
Yep, looks great.
Yes.
And please confirm that you can hear it too once I start.
Yes, hello. So I'm Peter Hoffmann. I'm the co-CTO at Data for Life. And I'm here responsible for the development of tools for OHDSI. So we basically develop multiple open source tools in the OHDSI ecosystem, and as well contribute to existing OHDSI tooling. My background is software engineering, and I started to work on software for the healthcare sector by now something like over 10 years ago. We are here located in Singapore, and Data for Life is a company which is the main headquarters is in Germany with a co-location here in Singapore. Let me give you a short intro into what Data for Life is. So Data for Life is a non-profit organization funded by the Hasso-Plattner Foundation. So our goal is to have impact, not to make revenue. And so by that we are mission driven, and we try to always find partners to collaborate to develop our software. As well, I mean, part of our mission is as well to open source our software, so to make it available to the general public. And now I will give a little bit of an overview of what we do so far in the OHDSI ecosystem. And so one tool we just recently released as open source is Data to Evidence. And Data to Evidence is an end-to-end solution to manage healthcare data and analyze healthcare data, to bring basically the data, which is in silos, into one clinical data model and make it available to researchers. So you can find it in the OHDSI GitHub org. And it consists of two parts. One is more basically addressing so the data owners. So there we basically have tooling to support the process of integrating OMOP data and of managing the access to OMOP data, and how researchers can work with the data. So there we have basically tooling for mapping medical concepts. So there's as well so in a very similar functionality like what the Usagi tooling has in as part of the OHDSI toolset, but basically with a web UI. Then we have a web UI on top of White Rabbit to define the data mapping, and we have as well tooling to actually implement the ETL process. So, so to do the technical implementation by defining SQL scripts and Python code to transform the data and bring it into the OMOP format. In addition, we offer to data owners as well functionalities to manage access, so that researchers can request access to the data. The data owners can grant this access, and so that's basically what's integrated in the platform for the data owner side. And then for the researcher side, we have as well a set of tools. So one is basically to first explore the data and build initial cohorts where you can interactively query the data. So you basically define filter criteria which of a patient group, and immediately basically in a chart results how many patients are there, and you can basically stratify the data according to different attributes. That tool then offers the possibility to export that cohort as well in the Atlas format, and then you can we have integrated as well as a cohort builder of Atlas to verify that cohort in the Atlas format is like expected, and you can basically further refine the cohort as the two cohort builders have slightly different formats, so not all the features are supported yet. So if you want to basically participate in a network study, then it probably makes sense to verify that the code in the Atlas format is as you expect. And then we offer basically as well interactive notebooks in the platform, where you can then basically do the further analysis of the data. There we are currently working on integrating as well the Hades tooling and the Strategos tooling, so that basically with the goal that you can basically use the platform as well to really run network studies, define network studies, participate in network studies, execute network studies. So that's a very brief overview of the data to evidence platform we are having. So overall, it's basically the idea is to integrate existing OHDSI tooling and have more or less an end-to-end platform on one side to integrate the data, to bring it to the OMOD format and make it available to researcher, manage access to of the data. And on the other side, for the researchers, they have an end-to-end pipeline to easily explore the data, to understand the data, especially if researchers are new to the data. Then to define the cohorts, and then to run the analysis and participate ultimately in network studies. Yes, and so I think another workstream we are having is that we started to collaborate with the Atlas team to look into redesign of Atlas. I think Atlas offers a very rich functionality to build cohorts on a detailed level, and I think the challenge some users have with Atlas is that it has a relatively steep learning curve. And so we basically started to look into trying to see basically is there ways to improve the usability of Atlas so that new users can more easily get started with Atlas and start using it and widen basically by that the user base of Atlas. We looked at basically three different work streams, the user interviews to first assess as well, what's the current experience with Atlas, how is it used currently, what are the important features of Atlas, and where basically do current users see challenges with using Atlas. Then another topic we are looking into is then basically actually drafting basically a new UI for Atlas. So that's something we as well just started, and on the right side you can see a very early wireframe of some ideas how to improve certain things. And then the third stream will be the implementation of the new user interface, which will happen sometimes in the future. So the user interviews is something which is already ongoing. The UX redesign is something which we just started, and the implementation is something which will happen sometime in the future. And just to go there a little bit more detailed in the work stream there, which is already ongoing, is the user interviews. I mean, there we basically ask about various topics, usage of Atlas, especially the focus on the concept set selection and building, the cohort building, then the analysis pipeline, and then as well to gather feedback about our initial thoughts regarding UI and UX improvements. We concluded by now basically the first batch of user interviews and are currently summarizing their some results, and have already several users in the pipeline, but are currently as well looking for additional users to participate in these user interviews to gather feedback from a wider range of users. I think recently as well, the Atlas team posted in the OHDSI forum a survey, which is as well, I think, the starting point for these user interviews. There are a couple of questions which are then asked to everyone, and then you can as well indicate their interest in participating in the interviews. Yeah, and if you're interested in participating in an interview as well, feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, so I think that was my short intro into what Data for Life is, what we do in the OHDSI community. And yeah, that concludes the presentation. So I would now stop sharing.
It's really great to see. I was really, so I was interested. So why did your organization choose to go with OHDSI? Oh, hey, Sean, let's pause that. Part of that community. So,
all right.
Thanks, Sean. Excellent. Let's go back to our speakers. So yeah, so I was really impressed with Peter's group. They're relatively new to OHDSI, but it was really interesting that they came from a foundation that had such a great broad perspective on impact that allowed them to do this. One is I really like that they actually bundled lots of our pieces together into one end-to-end solution. So they kind of got to see how they connect with each other. And I was actually really impressed that they were able to participate in some of our UI UX discussions about what a next generation of refactored Atlas might look like. So I kind of found, that was, it's really nice to see foundations like that, supporting software development that has such a great potential impact upon our community. But I feel like that's really quite a great contribution for us for this year. Do you see any potential? The question I wanted to get back to with you guys, I thought, let's see, did I miss a question from Senna? Did he have one in here? Let's see, it's like, I wanted to see, do you guys see any opportunities for crowdfunding? I like the idea of if a site needs one feature, they could fund that feature with an engineering shop. But what if we need to have more than one feature and we wanted to do a full refactoring of a platform? Do you see potentials for us to be able to do a crowdfunding opportunity?
Crowdfunding is hard, harder than people think. It is essentially a marketing exercise. I saw someone in the chat say OHDSI should consider having a marketing group, and I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but crowdfunding is highly related to marketing, because you have to find, let's say for every 100 people that you reach, 1 or 2 is prepared to help you crowdfund it. That means, and I don't know how many dollars each individual will go, but you can start thinking about how many people you have to reach in order to get crowdfunding for something that's meaningful, more than just a few hundred or a few thousand or even tens of thousands of dollars. And so I'm not convinced that there's a big enough audience out there that cares about OHDSI the way we all care about OHDSI to make crowdfunding viable. But I would be delighted to be proven wrong.
And when you say large enough, there is a very large crowd, but not in the millions to billions that you might need to do.
I'm not saying there's not a big community, but I'm just saying if you apply that 1% conversion rate at a particular number, you can just build a spreadsheet for what you need to do, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think a crowdfunding like that is I would agree with James, is near impossible. But if you would change it to crowdfunding, saying, hey, but can we go around and find, instead of one organization paying for a large piece of work, can we find 10 of them? So it's not the crowd in terms of individuals, but crowd in terms of 10, rich individuals or organizations that can actually contribute a bit more. I think those are feasible. And we've done them in the past where we basically asked several organizations, hey, is this something that will benefit you? Would you be willing to pay 20% of this cost to actually refactor this?
So that model is actually,
it's still an exercise in marketing. You still need to, it's a lengthy process. You need to go through all of these organizations, proposing, hey, is this what you actually want to pay for? But with these kind of lower numbers, I think it's possible.
I think so. What you're saying, now I consider that like a consortium model. If we distribute the engineering costs across 10 sites because we have unique needs. James mentioned a great one. We have potential learning health systems that want to do all kinds of fun stuff with the OHDSI data, bringing in imaging and genomics and clinical notes and all those types of things. So, but that is really just one group of our community, and so maybe there and they and there could be uses for that, could be of enough value for them to form that type of consortium. And that would still be in their best interest to keep it in the open source realm, and there could be some member benefits, I guess, where if you wanted to withhold the software before you release it to the open source community for 6 months, that I could tolerate too, for a short period of time. But I do really like the idea that it stays within the mainstream. If they fork it off, then they end up having to own the whole cost of the code as the rest of the community moves forward. Really nice. That is great. Any other last thoughts? And also, Anthony Senna put together a link. Please take a look at the link. He is helping spearhead this effort to do some focus groups on what might be what might the next generation of Atlas look like. So he's doing some focus group interviews around the Atlas UI UX redesign, and Peter and team are assisting him in those efforts. So it's really exciting to see once we have it. You're right. Once you have a good enough vision, it's a lot easier than then to say what does it take to get to that vision than just saying we need to have to do a new refactor. So I'm really excited we're beginning to put in that work. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It is now, it is time. It's 2 o'clock. And so with that, we'll conclude our Open Source Developers Conference. It was really exciting to see everyone here today join us in celebrating and thanking all of our open source developers for all they do for our community, all 365 days of the year, apparently. That is just wonderful. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much.